What is up, everyone? Welcome into another edition of MLB Live, this time for July 19th. I just started the live thing. I need to post the link in our Discord, so bear with me while I do that. We'll just kind of let people trickle in for the time being, and then we'll really jump into the slate, kind of just go over all of the hitters, pitchers, stacks that we like tonight. It's a pretty big slate. I believe 10 games. Hopefully this doesn't just go when I click into it. But we'll see as I get this. Oh, it did. Anyway, I'm posting it in the Discord now. And then we can really just get down to it. So if you're watching this on replay or anything, just skip ahead, like, I don't know, a minute or something, and it will probably be about where we're starting it. But as for the slate, I do think it's solid. I like the slate. I don't think that there's too many great pitching options. I think it's a reasonable slate, but you know, it's more for hitters than pitchers tonight. There's only, I don't know, maybe 5 pitchers that I'm really even slightly interested in. Most of them are above like 8,500. I did initially believe that Casey Mize was a fine play, still on that weird innings limit. Also, just so everyone knows, I can read what you're saying this time. 100% that works. So if you have any questions, 100% feel free to ask. I will answer those as I go. Anyway, back to Casey Mize. Detroit just continues to do their weird stuff with pitchers where they want them on either a pitch limit or an innings limit, maybe whichever one comes first. I don't know. He's a young kid that they should be wanting to get MLB experience. Oddly enough, they just want him on a limit. I get what they're doing, trying to preserve his arm and everything, but it just feels weird at this point. Let's get down into the slate, though. We can kind of start, as always, you know, afterwards. If you miss anything, you can go back. I also want to let everyone know, go ahead over to dfskarma.com. You can find all of our free content. I wrote the MLB breakdown today. I know Ben's coming out with game theory. If you want to pick up one of our core plays packages, you can do so on the site. We have daily, weekly, and monthly options. I think it's a really good deal. I know that Ben has been on fire recently. I've had a very, very good MLB season where we've come in like the top 5, like upwards of 10 times already. So it's been really nice. Also, you can get into our Discord for 100% free. If you haven't already done that, I highly recommend it. We're just kind of in there talking all day. You'll get more than just DFS too. That's where we give out all of our free bets. We give out prop plays. Sometimes in the free channel, there's also the props package if you wanted to get that. But really just a lot of things happening, and you can talk to basically anyone else in the Discord, or, you know, myself, Ben, Rube, anyone, Anthony is in there. But that's 100% for free. Just go over to dfskarma.com and you'll see the chat room. You can get in there, or I believe it's also chatdfs.com, and you can get in there. Texas strikes out a lot, right? Yeah, so Texas strikes out a lot generally, and Mize doesn't really get a lot of strikeouts. No, that's completely correct. It doesn't bother me. I think that Casey Mize would be in a really good spot if I didn't know that he was throwing 4 innings. Like, I don't want to pay, you know, $6,600 for 4 innings of Casey Mize, because one, I don't really want to pay for 4 innings of anyone, but at least if you have someone that can strike people out, as long as they're cheap, you can really just hope that they hit value at that point. But Casey Mize, if he's throwing 4 innings, you're basically like max hoping for 4 strikeouts. It's just not worth it, in my opinion, which is why I've moved off of him. If I see anything about him throwing more innings, 100%, I have no problems going there. Then it's just their coach recently said for the next few games, they still want him down a little bit. So we can get into kind of the actual good stuff and stop talking about how ridiculous it is that Casey Mize isn't throwing. Hey, Luke, doing really good today. I really like this slate. I think we're in a good spot. I believe if I'm spending up, there's two clear-cut options that I guess I'll say would sit above 9,000. It's Kevin Gausman and Yu Darvish. I do think that Kyle Gibson's relatively fine. He is a good pitcher. He's found a lot of success this season. It's just I don't have him on the level of Gausman or Darvish. So I prefer one of those two. For me, I get that Darvish is in the better spot just because he gets Atlanta without Acuna, which obviously is like a little bit of a watered down lineup for them. I still prefer Gausman. I just believe he's the better pitcher, and I'm slightly worried about the matchup against the Dodgers, but I more or less am just I prefer the talent to the matchup when I'm paying up this much. And specifically, Kevin Gausman's been better when they outlawed all the sticky substance. It's real difficult to say that. Kevin Gausman isn't a guy that really changes how he pitches or anything because of that, and that's why I like him so much at this point. So I prefer him to Yu Darvish. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer per se, especially in cash games. I understand playing Darvish. He's got the better Vegas odds. Gausman's actually an underdog in this game, but I just prefer to go there. I think as the SP2, for me, it feels relatively obvious with Shohei Ohtani. I do believe that Ryan Yarbrough, just because of his Vegas line, could get some ownership. And then Tony Gonsolin, although I don't trust Gonsolin whatsoever at this point. So in cash games, I think you're choosing one of Kevin Gausman, Yu Darvish, and then you're probably also choosing one of Shohei Ohtani and Ryan Yarbrough. I believe that Ohtani is the better option of those two. I don't have any issues really with any of those four, specifically in cash. I think that's probably where you're going. Someone asked, do I like Alec Mills? Kind of funny. Yes, I do. I do like Alec Mills tonight, which is kind of weird for me to say because I don't think that Alec Mills is, an overly good pitcher. The good news is his ERA is well above his xFIP. He's due for regression. There's not much strikeout upside with him, but against St. Louis, they're not a very good offense. They do strike out a lot against right-handed pitching. So I do love, or I guess I wouldn't say I love him. I think Alec Mills is a very good play. And I think that with Casey Mize getting checked off of my list to the point where I'm not going to use him, Alec Mills for $100 more is a very solid option. Outside of that, for tournaments specifically, I think that Kyle Muller can be considered. He does have very good strikeout stuff. I don't trust him whatsoever. I don't like the matchup against the Padres. It's very, very difficult. They're in Atlanta. And the Padres have a few guys, specifically Fernando Tatis Jr., who realistically have just been significantly better on the road. If you look at the way Tatis has played in San Diego versus on the road, it's pretty crazy. With that said, there is indeed weather issues in the Atlanta-San Diego game. At the moment, it's 4:30 Eastern time. We have hours until the game, and Atlanta's pretty finicky with their weather. So at this point, it's pretty difficult for me to say that you're going to want to avoid the game because I just don't know what's going to happen. So I'll more or less just say you should be looking out for the game. It's one that it could get postponed, not just like a late start or anything. Very well could get postponed. Not a game that I absolutely love on this slate. I guess it makes cash games easier with just going Gausman over Darvish because you're not going to mess around with the weather. So unless something changes, very clear that you're going Gausman over Darvish. If we get a weather update, I think it'll go back to more of a 50-50 split. But I guess that's more or less how we're attacking pitcher. I don't really think there's anyone else that I want. If you want to take like a weird shot, Caleb Smith has strikeout upside. It's not like Pittsburgh's offense is going to dominate really any pitcher or anything. So I do think that Caleb Smith's a fine play. I prefer Alec Mills for 100 more. I do think you could get weird and go like Mills Smith just because even like Gausman in this matchup, I don't think is a near a lock to just dominate or anything. I do think that Los Angeles can get to him. His xFIP does sit well ahead of his ERA, but his ERA is under 2, so it's just kind of how it's going to be. I guess getting into that, we can really just get into stacks here where I don't want to go over literally every stack that I would be willing to play. So if you guys have questions about stacks, 100% ask, and I'll let you know my opinion, because there's a ton of options. Yeah, Taijuan Walker can't get out of the Pirates. That's what a game that was. But there are a ton of stacks on this slate. So I do think that, there's going to be more than I say here. I'm just kind of going to outline my favorite ones. Someone asked just Mets stack. So yeah, Mets aren't my favorite stack. I actually prefer Cincinnati in that game. But I think that those are honestly probably my 2 favorite stacks of the entire slate. Just Jared Eichhoff is bad, and the Mets bullpen is not throwing overly well at the moment. So I think if Cincinnati can get to Eichhoff early, they'll probably just use some lesser arms. I think it's a really good spot. On the other side, Gutierrez also not good, gives up a lot of home runs. So honestly, if you just wanted to deck out the Mets Reds in like a full game stack in your lineup, I think that's a really good strategy tonight. Someone asked about the Miami Marlins. Yes, John Lester is just a shell of himself. The Marlins aren't really like the highest upside stack that you can get, but I love them tonight. I think they're in a really good spot. I do think they have plenty of upside specifically for the price tags. So I think that they're a really good option. I'll kind of get the obvious ones out of the way. If you can pay it for Toronto, they really shouldn't struggle too much with Nick Pivetta. I have no problems there. The issue is they're so expensive that I find it really difficult to get up to their price tags. But again, we're in a spot where you don't really have a ton of dominant pitchers. So if you wanted to do something ridiculous like Alec Mills and Caleb Smith along with the Toronto stack, I don't really think that it's a bad night to do that. The other one that seems relatively obvious is the Tampa Bay Rays. Spencer Watkins is not a good pitcher. I know he's thrown well early on. All of his advanced metrics suggest he's getting completely lucky. Tampa Bay has a high upside offense. There's a lot of players for them that I like tonight. They probably, I would assume, are one of the highest owned stacks on the slate. I feel like a lot of ownership is going to go to the Reds, but I haven't actually looked at ownership projections at this point. Outside of that, I think that Houston's 100% viable. I think a very sneaky stack is the Boston Red Sox on the opposite. Watkins, he's not good. If you're expecting him to be good over the long run, you're in for some bad news. But the Boston Red Sox on the opposite side of the Toronto Blue Jays, they're the obvious stack in the game, but Ross Stripling isn't. He's not a bad pitcher. He's just also not good. And Boston is a very good offense. The other thing that Stripling struggles with is home runs. So I do think that there's going to be a lot of upside in that Boston offense tonight. I guess the only other stack that I'm like truly interested in would be the Arizona Diamondbacks. Chase DeJong is not good whatsoever. Arizona's playing at home. They're a much better home offense. It's a hitter-friendly stadium. I do think they go a bit overlooked just because they're not great. I will say, just off the top of my head, I know that Cole Calhoun is the minimum price on DraftKings tonight. So assuming he's starting, and I believe he's expected to hit second in the lineup, it's really just a free square. I don't know, because it's baseball and, it's a high variance sport. So I don't necessarily know how high owned Cole Calhoun would be. I would assume it's extremely high, but obviously, there's a lot of people that just will fade that because of the ownership. I do believe in a matchup against Chase DeJong, especially if he's hitting high in the order. He's a very good play. But I guess that is the perfect segue to get to position by position, right? As always, I'm just going to go through guys that I like. Guys that I feel like are underpriced, I'll probably hit like the top mid, maybe some salary relief ones. If you have any questions about anyone, obviously at each position, I'm not going to be able to hit everyone that I would consider playing. So if you have any questions, go ahead and just shoot them in here. I will try to answer everything. At catcher, if you're spending up, I think there's two plays, one being significantly better than the other, in my opinion. Wilson Contreras at 5,100 leading off for Chicago. I believe that he is the best spend up on the slate. The only other guy that I would probably consider over 4,000 would be Mike Zunino. I just don't necessarily love that he's hitting seventh. If he was hitting like fifth, he would probably be my top option. I do think there would be still an argument for Contreras, but with Zunino hitting seventh and Contreras leading off, I think that it's pretty clear Contreras for me. With that said, $500 difference, so a lot you can do, and I do feel like Zunino probably gets some ownership. I think, honestly, if you go in the mid-tier, it's going to be Stevenson. 3,600 gets the matchup against Eichhoff. He's actually a very solid hitter. To go along with it, like Tyler Stevenson's hitting third in the Cincinnati lineup. It's just a really good spot for a price tag that's surprisingly cheap. I would have assumed that it was over 4,000 at this point. Below him, Reese McGuire at 3K is a cheaper way to get a piece of Toronto's offense. People really aren't going to play him, especially in a Toronto stack. So if you wanted to get really weird, you could go like 9, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's just always, like a reasonable option. And then if you're quote unquote punting, I think that Tomas Nido at 2,600 is a really good option, just to kind of stick with the Reds Mets. And then Jonah Heim at 2,300 hitting fifth. I don't really love the matchup against Mize, but like we talked about, you're going to get at least half the game, unless he's throwing at just an incredibly high level where it barely takes him any pitches to get out of innings. You're going to get probably at least half the game against the Detroit bullpen. So I do think that Jonah Heim is a very good option. I'm now seeing that Arizona's lineup is out, so I guess when we get to outfield, we will see where Cole Calhoun is at. But Brian Holiday is the minimum price if you literally need a bottom-of-the-barrel catcher. Feel free. It's a good spot, just DeJong is not a good pitcher. That does it for catcher. We can move to first base. I feel like just because he's so ridiculously priced, Christian Walker has to be the top option at first base. If you read my MLB breakdown on dfskarma.com, you know that Walker's been hot and he's hitting fourth in Arizona against Chase DeJong. Why is he priced at 3,000? It doesn't make any sense. It's a pretty ridiculous misprice, in my opinion, by DraftKings. So if you're going down, I think that Walker's pretty much the obvious choice. I guess the other cheap option that I would say would be Anthony Rizzo. Outside of that, I think G-Man Choi or Yandy Diaz, both of them are fine for Tampa Bay. Pete Alonso, I like. One guy that I think is going to be low owned that I do really like is Joey Votto. He is significantly better at home. He's flashed more power this season. He's also hitting fourth. The big issue with Votto is that he's 5,100, and if you would have told me heading into the season that I would be willing to pay 5,100 at any point in time for Joey Votto, I would call you crazy. Turns out I'm probably willing to pay it tonight, especially if I'm going to stack Cincinnati. The big issue, is that I just kind of want to save the money with Christian Walker here because I do believe that it's such a bad misprice. But those are more or less the options that I'm considering. I don't think that I want to go down any farther really to anyone. If you want to take like Danny Santana, if you want to drop below somewhere like Christian Walker, Danny Santana's 400 cheaper. I just think that you can probably find 400 somewhere, and Walker is, more or less like a significantly better play on the slate specifically. Than someone like Danny Santana. Also, I guess the Miami guys are fine. It's weird that their lineup hasn't come out, but Jesus Aguilar at 3,900 against John Lester, I think is 100% viable. We can move to second base. I don't necessarily know what I want to do here yet. I think if you want to spend up and go like Marcus Semien, 100% fine. I probably prefer him to Jose Altuve. The only other guy that I would consider up there realistically would be Eduardo Escobar. But I do more, I guess I like him more in an Arizona stack than I do by himself. I think that he's 100% fine, but I probably want Arizona as a team. Josh Rojas also, he's significantly cheaper though. Around that price tag as well, Brandon Lowe, Jonathan India. I think they're both very good plays. Out of the three, if I had to pick one, probably Brandon Lowe, just because I like his upside. I like the way that he looks at the plate at the moment. But all of them can be used for a little bit more. Jeff McNeil, I have no problem, obviously, sticking with the Mets trend in that game. Alcides Escobar is more or less the cheap guy that you're going to go to. I guess him or Josh Harrison are both fine. They're 3,426 respectively. If you want to get weird and go like Matt Carpenter, he's hitting third for St. Louis. Obviously gets the matchup against Mills, who I said I'm fine playing, but I don't necessarily love him. So I don't think that I would go down to someone like Carpenter. I do think, if you want to get kind of weird in tournaments, it's viable. But Brandon Lowe and Josh Rojas are probably the two that really stick out here to me. I think that they're both very good. They're also both outfield eligible, so it's not going to be overly difficult to get either in your lineup if you want them. Moving to third base. Again, you can play a guy like Joey Wendell, Eduardo Escobar. They're viable here. I think my favorite option, and by a relatively large margin, is Rafael Devers. He's 5,800, and he hasn't been playing overly well, so people could 100% overlook him. On top of that, Manny Machado, assuming that game plays, gets a rookie left-hander in Atlanta. So I think it's a good spot for Machado to take a little bit of ownership off of Devers anyway. But when you look at his numbers against right-handed pitching, they're outstanding on the season. And the big issue for Stripling is that he struggles with home runs. So if I were to make a home run call tonight, I believe that Devers probably would be it. Outside of him, I think you can drop Eugenio Suarez is hitting sixth, and it feels like he's going to be relatively low owned just because he's not in the top five for Cincinnati. Great matchup against Eichhoff. He's been better against right-handed pitching. So I think that he's 100% viable, especially at only 3,700. If you want to drop to a super low price tag, Brock Holt is leading off against Mize in the Detroit bullpen. So 2,700 for a leadoff hitter. I don't like Brock Holt. I don't think he really possesses that much upside or anything, but 2,700 for the leadoff hitter on a team that's in a good spot, I'm not necessarily opposed to it. And then you have someone like Kevin Biggio at 3,500. That's a mid-tier price tag. JD Davis is hitting fifth for the Mets. He's 4,800. A lot of options on the slate, so it's going to be hard to go wrong. People are going to go wrong at the end of the night, but prior to the slate finishing, there's just a lot of good plays, I guess would be the better way to say this versus necessarily picking someone wrong, because obviously someone's going to score first by the end of the night. But moving to shortstop, if you're spending up, and again, this just sits on the game playing, it's Fernando Tatis Jr. He's significantly better on the road. If he walks, he could turn it into 7 quick. He could turn it into 12. There's just so many ways that he scores fantasy points versus everyone else. So I do think that Tatis is generally the right shortstop play if you have the ability to spend up. If you can't get to 6,000, I do think that Bo Bichette, Xander Bogaerts, even Trey Turner are all viable options. Down at 5, I have no problems with someone like Carlos Correa. So there's a lot of different ways you can go at the top of shortstop because there's so many good options. If you need to save a bunch more money, assuming Miguel Rojas is leading off for Miami, I think at 4K, he's too cheap for a matchup against John Lester. He's probably my second favorite shortstop behind Tatis. Kevin Newman's actually leading off for Pittsburgh. He's 2,300, gets the matchup in Arizona, which we talked about being hitter friendly. Smith isn't good, so it's not like you're overly worried about that or anything. And then obviously, Arizona's bullpen's really bad. So getting a leadoff hitter for what could be a solid offense, just because Pittsburgh isn't good doesn't mean they can't score. In a very good matchup at 2,300 is just really, really appealing. I also think you can take a shot on like Taylor Walls. He's hitting ninth, but I do like Tampa Bay a lot, so he should see plenty of opportunities for RBIs, runs, because he's hitting at the end of the order. You could even get weird and get him super low owned as part of your stack, and then if he goes off, you're sitting in a good spot because you have the rest of Tampa Bay as well. That's probably about it. If you want to take like a weird shot on someone like Kyle Farmer, feel free, but he's hitting 8th for Cincinnati, so I don't necessarily love him, but similar to Taylor Walls, he's only 2,700, so I do think that's relatively fine. At outfield, I mean, the most obvious option is Cole Calhoun. It turns out he is hitting second. Minimum price, he's 2,000. It's an egregious price tag. We will get to Ben Gamel in a minute. But Cole Calhoun, such a terrible price tag. Jarren Duran, actually, okay, so there's a ton of guys that are obviously way too cheap. I like Jarren Duran, even if he was hitting late in Boston's lineup. He's hitting second, so he's an obvious option at only 2,300. Tyler Naquin's 2,500 and gets the matchup against Eichhoff that we love. I mean, they're all just terribly priced. It's going to be really easy to fit what you want in with them. I think that Ben Gamel is okay. My only issue is I'm not going to play him over Cole Calhoun, right? And then I can probably find 300 or 500 to get to Duran or Naquin. So I don't see a reason to play Gamel. I think you can. I don't think like it's a terrible play or anything, but not really someone that I'm going to play tonight. Other options, I think you can use anyone for Cincinnati. Jesse Winker is a really good option. I think you can use the players for the Mets. I don't have any issues with that. Outside of them, as for like individual players that we're looking at, I think Michael Brantley's interesting. I think Kyle Tucker's interesting. Obviously, you can use like Brandon Lowe or Josh Rojas here. Tommy Pham, if that game plays, I really like leading off against a weak lefty. I think you can use like the Toronto guys, but I'm not going to prioritize them. Ross Detweiler pitching for Miami. Yeah, Washington does become a very viable stacking option. They obviously have a ton of upside. Their offense has been clicking. Juan Soto going absolutely nuts in the home run derby and then just continuing it. Yeah, I think that Washington's a really good option. You have guys like Austin Meadows in the outfield. I mean, there's so many good plays. Even like Akil Baddoo, I have no problems paying 3,500 for him. He's been on fire, and I'm not so scared of Kyle Gibson that I don't want to use anyone against him. I just wouldn't stack Detroit. You have guys that are just way too cheap for Arizona, like David Peralta. I mean, there's so much going on in the outfield today that it's hard to just nail down a couple guys. But that's about what we have. I just realized that the last time I was on here, I did not do a home run prediction. So I will give you 2 for today. The first one I already said with Devers. I believe that he is going yard tonight. I'm gonna lock that one in. I really, really like him in this game. The second one, I'm gonna go with Jesse Winker. I don't like golf hitting in Cincinnati's hitter-friendly stadium. I believe that he is the second home run of this slate. So that's what I got for you guys. Thank you for joining in, for chatting it up here. Don't forget, you can go to dfskarma.com and read all of my articles, Ben's articles, Rube's. We have a ton of info. You can also go to the chat room section there and get into our free Discord. I don't know what could possibly be better than that. Again, this is on replay, so if you just tuned in late, you can go back and rewatch. But thanks everyone for tuning in, and good luck tonight.